part of the Another Realm Media Network. Welcome to this episode of Mysterial Experiences, where we delve into the heart of mystery and the ethereal. Today we invite you on a voyage through shadowed realms of the unexplained. From spectral whispers to cosmic enigmas. Join us as we explore tales and phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, in a quest to uncover truths hidden in the fabric of the extraordinary. Prepare for a journey into the unknown, where each revelation is a step closer to unraveling the mysterious. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Mysterial Experiences. I'm your host, as always, Josh Rutledge, and we have a special guest with us here today, Miss Nancy Thames. And Nancy is, you've got a lot of history, both related to the phenomena and not. But I think what really kind of drew me to you more than anything is your want for disclosure. It's now is the time. We've waited long enough, and that's really what your passion is right now, is pushing towards disclosure and an awakening of society and etc. And I am 100% on board for that type of activity. If you wanted to give a little bit more information about yourself, love to hear it.
Sure. My name is Nancy Thames. I am a lifelong contactee with interdimensional and positive extraterrestrials. And my focus is on educating humanity on misinformation and set some stories straight. One being that we are going through an ascension. Humanity as a whole is waking up. And that is exactly what has triggered the interdimensionals and the positive extraterrestrials to come in great numbers in motherships into our galaxy, into our solar system, because they see humanity is finally reaching that intellectual point where they can have a intellectual conversation with us, and there will be no misunderstandings. They are not gods. They are not angels. Mm-hmm. They are simply billions of years ahead of us in evolution, and the word technology does not even apply, because in their world it's so above anything that what we see as a human being. There's no words for some things, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So yes, there were extraterrestrials here and before that have worked with the government, but what I have been all my life, I'm 63 years old, all my life, since my conscious memory start back at 2 and 3 years old. And they were coming to get me and taking me on craft. And I'm talking about face-to-face, physical contact. And then I would come home. And this has happened all my life. And I never really understood it. And when I was very, very young, it was fun. It was playful. I had no reason to be afraid, because I really hadn't been out in the world around me to have any prejudgment or anything about it. So really and truly, I did mention it to my parents at times, and they dismissed it and thought that I was just having a very imaginative dream. Mm-hmm. And I had a baby brother, and they really didn't have time to deal. My sister and I are 11 months apart. And I would be going in their room telling them all these little stories, and they really didn't have time for that kind of thing. They had a newborn baby and things right. Like that were happening. So I learned very quickly to suppress it. It keeps everybody happy. And, it just was the thing to do. And I accepted that. So really and truly, I never really got scared until I got into my teenage years. And when I became a teenager and my parents would stop me from talking about these visits or beings in my room at night, etc., because they would tell me that other people would judge me, that they would put people in the past that had made comments like this, they would put in a institution for, mental instability. And so again, I learned, that it just was not something that I could talk about. And I just accepted that, and I suppressed a lot, meaning that I didn't have anybody to talk to at that time. Even my sister and stuff, I didn't talk to her about it because I didn't want to get in trouble. So, and I also noticed as I got older too, I grew up in the South, which is considered a Bible Belt, and these topics are not things that you can talk about. You will get in trouble real fast, thrown out of the Girl Scout troop, sent to the principal's office, etc. So, it's just something that you did not talk about. So,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, even when I was in high school and I lived in a small town, but around holidays and things, we would go to bigger cities like Nashville, Tennessee or Chattanooga, Tennessee to shop for holidays. And we would go to a bookstore. My daddy liked to look in the bookstores, and I would figure out where these type of books would be, and there were never very many. And and what was strange to me is that when you would walk up on this like category of books, the people there would act like, "Oh my goodness, I'm at the wrong spot." Excuse me, they were embarrassed themselves to be there. So that was just affirmation that what my mom and dad had told me, that you just do not talk about these things. So I'll let you go ahead and ask me something.
No, I was just going to say that, I grew up in Kentucky, and although not technically part of the Bible Belt, I would say that it's, on the fringe edge of it. And I grew up in a church, and I have a very similar situation with you. At the time, I don't know that I necessarily drew a correlation to the stuff that I'm experiencing now then, but too, I had psychic experiences and things like that I really didn't feel like I had an opportunity or a voice to be able to share those things. And so like you, I kind of tamped it down. Later on when I got to high school, I was really big into church, and was labeled something called a prayer warrior, which basically meant I could pray on things and they would happen and energy would raise and all that kind of stuff. And again, I think that was kind of tapping into my psychic intuition type ability. But at the time, you see it through the lens that you see things through. And so, 100%, very similar in our things. But what really helped for me, and I'm curious what your situation is, but for me, somewhere around the age of, August of 2019, so I was about 40. I had just turned 41. And I had a dream that felt much more like a memory. And from that point forward, it's kind of set me on the journey that I'm on now, leading to doing this podcast. So in your situation, I'm sure you had sort of an awakening moment that allowed you to be able to share and feel free to share the things that you were experiencing as well.
Yeah. When I got in my 20s, and moved away from home and became a wife and became a mother of two boys, I started looking into some things, and I realized at that point, though, that my experiences were very different from what these books people were writing. They were calling themselves abductees, and I wasn't having that kind of experiences. My experiences were not anything scary, or I wasn't forced to do anything I didn't want to do. It just was not like that. So it was very confusing to me, very confusing. But I do now, I look back on it all, and I can reflect back, and I understand a lot of things I didn't before, and for me, though, to finally, I started timefordisclosure.com, the website. It's about 5 years ago, something like that. And then I started doing some articles on the website and starting a Facebook group. But I still wasn't ready to podcast and do all this kind of stuff. So, really, after doing that for a while and getting my toes in the pond, so to speak,
Yeah.
it was about going on almost 2 years ago, something like that. It may not be quite 2 years. I don't keep up with dates. I had a Kundalini awakening that the interdimensionals decided to give me
Mm.
because they wanted my subconscious to open up into my human consciousness, because they've always told me when I would ask them a question, they would say, "You already know." And I'm
Mm.
like, "I do not." And they're like, "You already know."
Yeah.
And I never understood what they meant. And throughout my life, looking back, when they would come to get me, they would always send three grays. I now know that these three grays are the same grays that have been with me since birth. And one in particular is assigned to me, and she's a female gray, and she's reddish brown, and she is a hybrid. And she was genetically designed by the interdimensionals and the tall grays to do the back and forth leg work from
Mm-hmm.
craft to earth. Interdimensionals and extraterrestrials really don't like the density here on earth. So
Mm-hmm.
they created this hybrid and tweaked in her DNA and the others with her who I'm not bonded with, but they always travel in threes,
Mm-hmm.
always. So she doesn't have a problem with it, but she is an example of why a lot of people think they're robotic. She is not robotic. She's a biological being, but she is task oriented, and
Mm-hmm.
she does not have, there's no negotiating with her. There's no emotion
Yeah.
visibly seeing emotion or anything like that. I mean, she's task oriented, and if I get, like, if she catches me when I'm having anxiety or sensing something that's what they would consider fear or my being upset, they will simply touch me on my forehead or on my head and tap me out into a um I'm functional, but I'm in a more like a walking sedated state, kind of
Yeah.
like. And the problem with that is that when I would come back home, wake up, my memories are fragmented.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like that, because it's like you can't piece it all together. So, and I didn't understand this for so many years, that
Mm-hmm.
that's what they would do. And I understand now they do that because it makes their job easier, and also it makes it easier for the human, because there is something important that they're doing. In my case, they are checking my evolutionary stage, they're checking
Mm-hmm.
my spiritual growth, they're checking my mentality on how I am handling being human and having my human life and experiences, and how I am integrating, figuring out my extraterrestrial consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
because I have found out through visions that they've shown me, and they took me before a group of elders when I did meditated and asked for face-to-face and answers to why it was happening to me, and they did. They gave me
Mm-hmm.
answers and showed me. At the time, they showed me a vision of myself making the decision to have the human experience, and to
Mm-hmm.
later on find out that I had agreed to come here, to be here at this pivotal point for humanity, to help explain help with misinformation, and help people to
Mm-hmm.
understand their reasons for choosing now and what it all means. But at the time that they were explaining the fact that I wanted to know why, they could not tell me everything. I was like approaching 30, and they could not tell me
Mm-hmm.
anything other than the fact that I had made a choice to be here.
Well,
So,
it's, I'm just gonna say, I find that uh, sometimes the information that's given doesn't make sense now, but it's for use later.
yeah,
But they need it to be there in your mind so that when that situation occurs, it'll trigger and it'll remind
Yeah,
you of something, or you'll just kind
yeah,
of intuitively know that whatever the case may be. And so,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, the same situation for me. I get
yeah.
downloads and things like that, and at the time, I don't really understand what they mean, but some scenario will happen, months or
You
years
know,
later, and all of a sudden, I know what they're talking about.
yeah, and being human, it's easy for us to suppress or brush this aside because we can't piece it all together.
Mhm.
For example, whenever I would have traumatic events in my life, unfortunately, I've been through two divorces, which were very, very traumatic and broke my heart. And I thought it was the end of the world. And they would come to me and tell me, if your experience here on earth ever gets to be too much for you, you can always come home. And see that I just ignored what they were saying. I didn't put the
Mhm.
two and two together. So now I understand I was an extraterrestrial that made a decision to come here. I was an interdimensional like them, and I made the decision to come here and help humanity and help all the positive extraterrestrials integrate into our lives here on earth, and
Mhm.
to spread good messages and to help humanity to well, there's just a lot of things that we've got to do
Mhm.
and change. And my goal is to help people with it, because
Yeah.
we've been lied to. There's so many things. It's unbelievable. So,
Yeah. So, and I'm in a very similar boat. In my own journey, I have come to understand that I was also an interdimensional being. I chose to come here in
mhm.
this lifetime. I'm what Dolores Cannon in her books describes as the third wave. And so, yeah, bottom line, you and I are on
Yeah.
on a very similar
Yeah.
path.
And I realize now all the little snippet of things they were saying to me, it all makes sense now. I could never make sense of it
Yeah.
before, but once they gave me that Kundalini awakening,
Mm.
and that scared me to death. I didn't know what it was. You know, I don't meditate like some people sit and meditate.
Mhm.
When I want to talk to them, I meditate, but really, you could call it meditate, or you could call it my form of prayer with them, because I have a direct connection, and that's just the best way I know how to do
Yeah.
it. And it's the way I've always done it, but, it's really interesting. People just need to realize that, yes, there were some extraterrestrials that came here and had like some negotiations with governments and different folks here, but those are not the ones that are here now. The ones that are here now are what I call positive. And when I say they're positive and I refer to the others as negative, they are not demonic. They simply are self-serving. They were here doing did trade outs with government and did things to better themselves,
Hmm.
and didn't necessarily keep all the agreements that they made with governments. And the simple fact that they came down here and did abductions, or their I don't even like that word, because I think a lot of people simply misunderstood what was happening to them, because they're not demonic and they're not warlike. They were simply doing their job, which
Well,
all of that race are geneticists,
but I think that also, though, that there's a group, and I think it's a pretty significant group that are they lack the emotional intelligence, and they're indifferent to us and our emotions, and so they take actions that, again,
Yeah,
speaking of that lens that we see things through, they take actions that to us
yeah,
seem hateful and hurtful. In all actuality, they have a horrible bedside manner,
exactly.
and
It's
they
just like
don't know that they're causing us trauma.
they don't have the empathy
Yeah.
that the positive extraterrestrials have. The positive extraterrestrials will not overstep the cosmic law boundary of human beings being here on free will. Um, Generally, from what I've been told, that the positive extraterrestrials and the interdimensionals they will have contact with contactees. And these are people that are in some way direct lineage with them, where what I call negative extraterrestrials, the ones that work with the government and did some abductions, they randomly pick people for whatever served their agenda. And when they did that, they were considered a renegade race. And they were no longer part of the collective consciousness of all the rest of the grays that are positive. But they cut them off. So they were not part of that hive of mind. They were like two separate consciousness minds where they used to all be one, because they overstepped their boundaries. And I do know that it's not just the grays. There's, in every single race, there are some that have no empathy for human beings, do not want us to ascend, do not want us to reach higher consciousness, because they don't want to see us up on their level.
Right.
And, so.
Yeah, draconians come to mind.
Yeah. The only reptilians that I've met and touched, held hands, and have a connection with were positive reptilians. But I do know there are some bad ones. And when I was living in Australia, I had an experience when I lived way up in the mountains. I lived on a mountain called Mount Me, and it was way up, isolated, way up there and stuff. And a group of grays, along with human beings, tried to abduct me, and they got me to the craft. And then when I was on an exam table, and then these female humans were running around, and the grays were in the background, and they were like, take her back, take her back. And the grays were telling them, take her back, because they realized that I belonged to the interdimensional.
Yeah.
And they knew that they were crossing a boundary they do not need to mess with, because they are of higher dimension, higher technology, and a much huger mass number of them. So they sent me back. And when I got back home, I was asleep. And then when I woke up, I was like, holy snap, what was that? So by walking distance, I wasn't very close to Pine Gap, but by air or craft, I was pretty darn close. Yeah. So I do know that there's been incidents where even there's been some government people with some extraterrestrials doing some abductions for whatever reason. I don't know. So
yeah, I mean, it's, as you know, there are many reasons that I'm sure we'll probably never know. And the biggest thing is, I want to make sure that I'm clear for anybody who's listening who has had a negative experience with contact. I'm not in any way, shape, or form negating your experience or how it has affected you.
It's real.
But I do think that sometimes we color things based on how.
Not everybody has the same experience that I have. And my experience is from birth, so it's very, very different. So I believe their stories. I know it's got to be real. Too many people have the same things that they say, and it's unfortunate. It really is.
It is. And it's, like I encouraged on another show that recently that I recorded on, if anybody listening has had an experience like that, MUFON does have a team that's dedicated to helping you in work, and giving you resources to help you process through that experience. And I highly encourage you to go MUFON.com. There's a submit a sighting, and then when you get there, there's a separate section you can go into where you can submit if you had a contact or an abduction experience. And I highly recommend you do so, simply because the amount of resources that they can provide you with to help you process through that, it's important.
You can get into a group discussion and share experiences, and they have therapists to help. I've belonged to OPUS, capital OPUS, and that's either abductions or paranormal things, that people might want help with. And then there's UAP Medical Coalition that's also puts out a lot of information and help for abductees and paranormal trauma. And I have gone around everywhere in my part of Mississippi talking to mental therapists about educating themselves, because the way I see it, and they've encouraged me as well, as this disclosure rolls out, more people are going to start to remember things. And we are going into the fourth dimension. We are rising in higher consciousness. And as that happens, we're going to see things we've never seen before, and we're going to understand things and remember things. And our physicians and mental therapists and all these organizations need to be ready to be there for humanity. I think it's very important.
Well, and I think that, like you said, years ago, many years ago, this type of conversation might land you in a padded room.
That's right.
But more and more people are becoming open to it. I mean, I've actually got a therapist that I see, and she's actually open to this kind of stuff. And so we talk about some of this kind of stuff. So the more I think that people talk about it and are willing to explore what it means, and not just to explain it away as a medical condition or schizophrenia or whatever the case may be, the more we can, I think, again, grow. It's with every experience situation that doesn't result in a negative occurrence. That is, like, you getting hospitalized, you getting put on medicine because you're channeling. Doctor thinks you're voices in your head, right?
That's right. Right.
So as long as there's a positive outcome for a lot of those situations, it furthers our understanding of
and
what's going on and raises our
can
overall
get out and communicate about it more and feel comfortable about it. But I'll tell you another thing that, for me, I've experienced fear, and I still sometimes have to deal with it, and it's not what they look like. For me, human beings are on a very low frequency, and when if you're in a room with other human beings, you don't generally feel anything. Maybe occasionally you'll feel something. It just depends, but basically you don't. But when you're face to face with a extraterrestrial or interdimensional, they're at a higher frequency than we are. The frequency exchange between me and that being, it is overwhelming. And our brains are not used to this. So naturally, most people are going to think flight or fight, right? Because that's our human brain. We started off as cave prehistoric man and women. Everything around us was a predator. So when we see something, that's still in us. And so we see something that we don't see on a daily basis, we are scared.
Right.
So that's another thing too, that just for people, when they, is understanding the difference between true fear and then understanding that the brain has to adjust, and it's normal to have these feelings because they are at a higher frequency and you can feel it, and it feels really different.
And I can tell you that I've had situations where I can feel that they're there.
Yeah.
And I've had the kind of reaction of fear, and they leave. They just go, it's like, now's not a good time. I'll come back later, so.
What I do now is I go into my head and say, you've done this before, let's fall into the experience, because for me, I needed more conscious time, because that's the only way I can learn and grow and evolve. So, and the beautiful thing is that they don't push you. Like you said, if you want it to stop, it will stop. Yeah.
Yep. So you were talking about before when we kind of got started.
Yeah.
One of the drives you're working towards is a lot of the misinformation. Do you want to go into some of those misinformation? I think we've talked probably a little bit about it in the form of
Yeah,
like negative
yeah.
entities versus positive. Are there other things that you feel like people should be aware of when it comes to this
Well,
topic?
you know, I think people don't really understand the difference between an abductee, a contactee, and an experiencer. Um, so, a lot of people call themselves an experiencer just because they've seen some UFOs. That's very different than what an abductee has been through or what a contactee has been
Mhm.
through. And so that, and also the fact that, yes, there were some races here that worked with governments and did some not so great things. And these were
Right.
things they were not supposed to do. They were not supposed to do. So I kind of explained that when they did that, they were cut off, disconnected from
Mhm.
the good guys, so to speak. But I do know, and that when they started seeing that humanity as a whole, not one country, not it
Right.
didn't work that way. This is a universal, worldwide phenomenon. When they saw that the whole world was starting to reach higher consciousness, and we're getting there,
Yeah.
they came in great numbers in, and they told these other guys, okay, you've had your fun, leave humanity alone. And, you know, I was told that when they told them to stop, and I did see footage and video footage, and they showed me visions of all these craft that were leaving Earth.
Mhm.
I do know some stayed, and some still try to create problems because their goal is to keep humanity separated. They do not want us to unite and become one. And that's what we're meant to do. Is we are all one. We are
Yeah.
all energy beings. We're wearing, this is a human costume
Yeah.
underneath here. We're all energy beings, and
We're in a
we're
spacesuit.
all connected. Yeah, we're all connected, and we are all one. And when we wake up and realize this, all these bad guys and all this programming that they've done throughout our lives to manipulate us will cease to exist. Because for one thing, as we raise our consciousness, all these negative things like war or even negative attitudes or listening to negative news or in general, we
Hmm.
simply will outgrow these things.
Yeah.
That's part of evolution for humanity, is that we learn to evolve, and these old ways that we've been programmed to live and do will no longer serve us, and we will
Yeah.
adapt and learn new things.
I think the one of the first steps though that we can make in the here and now is to just treat everyone with respect,
Yes,
regardless of what life you lived versus what I lived versus what somebody else lived. Is we're all human. Let's treat us all with respect, um, and let's try to get rid of the hate that
absolutely.
is
and
so
and
prevalent
we need to
in our space
reconnect.
right now.
We need to reconnect with our planet and realize that we're not only connected to each other, but we are connected to our planet Earth, and we are connected to all the plants and trees, the water, the air. We're all connected. Anything we do will affect our planet and our environment, the nature and balance of our whole planet. And the thing is, it also ripples out into the universe because we are connected to them. And
Yeah.
once we wake up, we will realize who we are and how unique we are, and our connections to the universe, to extraterrestrials and interdimensionals, because we are all one. So they really want us to reach our higher consciousness, so we can all be one together and connected. And they are not here to control, take over.
Yeah.
They are billions of years ahead of us. That would have already happened if that was the case.
Well, and I think history tells that humans are reluctant to change.
Yes.
Quick change they're reluctant to. Slow, methodical change, it happens over it happens over millennia, and they don't even know that it's happening. So,
That's
and
exactly, yeah,
that's where we are right now, right? They're changing individuals one person at a time,
yeah,
and then eventually it's going to get to the point where the majority of people feel and think the way that we expect them to
yes,
feel and think, and the next thing you know, that's when we're at the moment of that kind
yeah,
of that evolutionary step.
yeah. This is a big deal. And people ask me, like, how do you know if you're in the fourth, fifth dimension, whatever, you know? Well, again, it's like what you just said. It's so gradual by the time we all get to it because it's not a physical place.
Hmm.
Fourth dimension is higher consciousness. And by the time we all get there and realize it, it will be like it's always been that way.
Yeah.
So basically, what you said, yeah,
It's kind of like I equate it to, you ever see like a picture or like a bumper sticker on the back of a car, and you're like, you look at it, you can't really figure out what it is, and you think it's this, and then when you finally see it for what it is, you can't see it the way you thought it. You can't see it
yeah,
for what you thought it was. So it's like you said, it's that once you have that recollection or that awakening, if you will, and see it for what it
yeah,
is, you no longer see it for what it was.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I know from my experience, reaching higher consciousness is a new way of thinking and a new way of living, and it feels great. And it's something that it's addictive, because
Yeah.
you want to feel good, and you'll find that as the better you act, the better the world treats you,
Mhm.
and your life becomes better. Doors open up for
Yeah.
you, opportunities, things get better. So
But
you know,
there's a downside to it as well, in that if you're around a lot of people who are not at that level, um, it can come across sometimes as you being detached or distant.
yeah,
And it's also really easy to slip back down into that. And it's kind of like if you've always, you're used to swimming in a warm pool, and then all of a sudden you get into a cold pool, it feels wrong, it feels off. And that's I've had that happen to me. I've, you know, gotten into the news, or I've gotten into people messages me about,
yeah,
all the terrible things that are happening in the world, and I find myself slipping down into those lower
yeah.
vibrational states, and then my mood gets all off, and
Well,
I just
that's
feel like
where
a
we need
horrible
to
person.
that's
Yeah.
why we need the groups to be around like-minded people and to have people to talk to and to help us with these transitions of thinking and of well-being. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes we do have to walk away from
Mhm.
negativity. I've been through two divorces. I mean, I know that, I mean, it's unfortunate, but sometimes things happen and
Yeah.
we just have no control over it. But that doesn't mean everybody is going to get a divorce by any means. But
No.
I think that the therapy thing is good. We need to communicate, and that's why I like to have my Facebook group. And I'm sure you have groups. You may even have your own group, but there needs to be places for people to communicate and
Hmm.
find like minded people that are experiencing new ideas and new thoughts, and a safe place to be able to, share information.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think that's real important.
And I think also too that it's when you first kind of have your what I call initiatory experience that kind of begins you in this ritual of awakening. Um, you're either one of two things. You're either scared about what it means for you and you don't want to share it with anybody,
Yeah.
or you're excited about what it means for you and you want to share it with everybody.
Yeah.
And in both cases, I would say that there is something to be said for controlled, thoughtful, the self disclosure, if you will.
Yes.
It can be very overwhelming for your friends and your family to hear
Yeah.
all of this at once. And so, really taking the time to think about, If you were receiving the information from one of your friends or family,
Yeah,
how best would you receive it, and to think about how
exactly.
to deliver it in that way?
Yeah,
Because I think that that's the biggest, that's what I hear the biggest thing from people is when they just spill it all to their spouse doesn't know where to go.
they
Like
think you're crazy.
they're
Yeah,
overwhelmed. They're drinking from a fire hose. They don't know what to do with it all.
right.
But if it's slow, kind of methodical, just like we were talking about, just like how
Mhm.
humanity is changing in a slow, methodical way, you can slowly introduce these things to your spouse, to your loved ones, to
Exactly.
your family, and then they're less likely to be so immediately resistant to it.
Yeah, everything takes time, and I look at it from how the interdimensionals and extraterrestrials have treated me. I'm 63 years old, so I mean, it's taken me a while, a long time to get to where I am. And the thing is, we're human beings. We have to make mistakes. That's how we learn.
Yep.
That's part of the human experience of our being here. Being here on Earth is a school. This is like a school, and it's an experience. And we make mistakes. We're only human.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you're very much, yeah, very much. I mean, it's, I'm always thinking there's a line in one of the Batman movies. I think it's the one with Christian Bale where he's saying, why do we fall down? And so we can learn to pick ourselves up. And it's very
That's
much
exactly
true.
right. Yeah,
And it's, also to remember that some, some ideas are not new ideas. That was one of the things for me that really helped me is I was having all of these ideas and I would record myself basically going on these, diatribe of information. And then I would listen to a book on audiobook, and here would be somebody else talking about the same stuff. Now, I could say, well, then I don't really know what I'm talking about. But the way I took it instead is to say, this is validation
it
that
is.
I'm
Yeah,
on the right track because I'm having these thoughts, and here's somebody else is having the same thoughts, and so it's validation for me that I'm on the right track.
absolutely. Yeah. I see that a lot. I see it every day, and I see our world is changing, and it's changing. And I think it won't happen overnight, as but for people, so they know it won't happen overnight, but it is changing, and it will be for the better, for future generations. And I think really all of us are the disclosure, you know, um, every person here, I think, made an agreement to be here. Not everybody is here for the same reason or purpose, but we all
Yeah.
intentionally chose to be here, and we're all part of disclosure. And I think we're going to be the generation that really makes the biggest difference for humanity, for the humanity's future. you know and that's why extraterrestrials and interdimensionals are here, because we are the generation that will wake up and start realizing that our old ways are not serving us, and there's some things that
Mhm.
we need to change to help humanity be better.
And I think the most important thing here, and this is something that I do with my kids and others that I've talked to, they do it with theirs, is to keep the magic alive. So many times us as adults, we had the magic as a kid. We believed in fairies and elves and dwarves and gnomes and all those kind of things. And then life came, and then we forgot about that stuff, and we pushed it down, we pushed it aside, and we forgot about the magic. And so it's keeping the magic alive, because that magic is what will actually help us change the world. Not
I think
in the
so
way that
too.
like we're creating magical
Yeah.
rituals, but the wonder that comes with believing in magic and believing in all those things, that wonder is what changes the world.
Yeah. And we have to remember that we have been programmed since the day we were born. We have been programmed to be like we are, and it's not our fault.
Mhm.
We were programmed. These things were done intentionally to keep humanity apart, because there's fractions above us that control us. We should not be using fossil fuels. We all know this.
Right.
But there are certain people that keep us dependent upon it. We shouldn't be using pharmaceutical drugs, synthetic drugs. Everything we ever needed was put here on this planet for us to keep us healthy and well. There's things here, and either they're sitting on a lot of technology, which I think they are sitting on a lot of technology. There should be no diseases. We should have no poverty, all these things. But all these things were done intentionally to keep us in fear and keep us separated. And that's the beautiful thing about us waking up, is coming together and realizing, getting smart and realizing that when we come together, we're unstoppable.
Yep.
We can do anything. Yeah.
And I want to make sure that anybody who's listening, knows that what we're talking about here, I think, is a spiritual evolution, and spirituality doesn't necessarily come from a religion, right? A
No, we
religion
don't.
is a structured framework, if you will, for how you practice your spirituality. But you
Right.
can be spiritual and not religious. And we're actually seeing that in polls around the world, that more and more people are putting on census forms and such that they're spiritual, not religious.
Yeah.
That spirituality is important.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes, I think, especially people maybe like, I'm one of them for sure, that grew up in a very restrictive faith, that now later on in life is looks at spirituality sometimes as a dirty word. And so it's really important to remember that it's not, that your spirituality is just that. It's how you see yourself from a spirit point of view, from your soul, your
Your
energy body,
soul.
whatever terminology you want to use. But it's not your humanity, it's your spirituality, which is a layer above it. And so
Yeah.
it's there's nothing wrong with looking at this stuff and using it as a means or a mechanism to think about your spirituality and what that means to you.
Well, another thing I'd like to clear up too, interdimensionals, extraterrestrials, they all have souls. They have souls, and they believe in a creator source. So that would be equivalent to what we call God, although they don't look at it like we do. We humanized everything. And so it's quite different. But then again, it's not that different. So they believe in creator source, and they believe that we're all one. And then we're all one. We all have souls. We're all connected.
Mhm.
So I know that they have souls. And I think a lot of people, I've heard people say, oh, they're demonic. Oh, they eat souls, or they steal souls. They don't do that kind of thing. So
Yeah, again, I think it's just like, I'll say it again, and people are listening to the show, or I've listened a couple of times, you probably get tired of me using this word, but it's all the lens that we look at things through, right? If you're born into a restrictive faith that calls anything that's not referenced or mentioned in the Bible, which a lot of the stuff, by the way, is mentioned in the Bible, but
yeah,
if they don't talk about it on Sunday morning, then your faith might say that it's deep, it's demonic, or it's of
yeah,
Satan, or whatever the case may be.
yeah,
But make sure that when you're evaluating this stuff, check your worldview to make sure that you're seeing things in the purest of ways, that you've not been indoctrinated in some way to think or see things through a
yeah,
specific lens, that you check your biases at the door, so to speak, and you enter this space, this opportunity for enlightenment and growing and learning without those biases in place.
yeah. I think the big thing for me was looking within, finding out who Nancy really is. Not the Nancy the world around me has programmed me into, but looking within and finding my soul, the soul Nancy, the one that loves everything and
Mhm.
understands our connections and stuff.
Yeah,
And it's a beautiful thing, really
it
is.
really is. I mean, Yes. And the really important thing here too that I want to make sure I caution people on is it's really easy to look at this thing and say, well, I can just move on to the next life. It'll be better. Suicide was never really meant to be the answer for anything. And so again, a little bit of a PSA, but if you're struggling with anything in life and you're considering suicide, please reach out to someone, talk to someone. You can call the suicide hotline. Really encourage that because, especially if you're struggling with abduction or things like that, and you're not willing to talk to anybody about it, it can feel like a very lonely place, and it can lead you down a dark path that could result in, just really harming yourself, and then also in perpetuity harming others and the loss of having you around. And so I
Well,
really encourage you to talk to somebody if you're working through or dealing with anything in that regard.
and the thing about that is that not only does it hurt themselves, but it hurts all the people around you that love you and care. You know, it's
Yeah.
because we're all connected.
Yeah,
I
it really
had
is.
to throw that in.
Yep, it really is. We are. I like to think of us as super organ. Humanity is a super organism, just like redwood trees in California and mushrooms that spread across the world, and and,
Yeah,
and bees and everything else that all work together. I mean, if we not if sorry, when we get to the point where we all see each other as equal and we work together as one unit, wow,
yes.
wow,
Wow,
what amazing changes will take place.
yeah, that's the
Wow.
goal. I hope we get there, and I think we will. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, but we
No.
have to start somewhere.
Yep.
We have, and
Just like right now, it's really not better for the planet to drive an electric car. It's really not. A lot of the stuff that goes into actually making the car doesn't really help the planet. But we have to start somewhere.
exactly, yeah,
And if starting somewhere means driving electric cars so that manufacturers can develop new techniques to make electric cars, which makes it better for the planet, then we started something.
yeah,
The constant saying of, well, it's not going to fix it. Well, it won't fix it if you don't try.
that's right. Yeah, and
So,
you know, so what if we don't see it today or tomorrow?
right,
What about our grandchildren or our
exactly.
grandchildren? We are the stepping stones to a better future for humanity. And we'll go down in history and be remembered. This generation will be remembered forever for us making these bold moves
Well,
and making a change.
and I'm not even thinking about it from the remembered forever. I just want my kids to look back and think my dad made a positive choice. He
Right.
lived the positive way.
Yeah, that's
And
what
he
we
made
got to do.
decisions and again, just like droplets in the pond, right? Droplets in the pond. Next thing you know, it's an ocean, and we're making change. So.
Yeah.
Um, well, Nancy, I want to thank. We're actually out of time. I want to
Okay.
thank you so much for being on today. It's been
Well,
a
thank you for having
fantastic
me.
conversation.
Yes. Thank you.
If anybody wanted to find more from you mentioned it earlier on in the show, but if you wouldn't mind your website or anything that they can use to find you on social
Yes.
media or whatever.
Yes, the website is timefordisclosure.com and the Facebook group is time for disclosure slash we have never been alone slash we are the disclosure. So any of those places, I'm always available, and I belong to a lot of other groups. I think they're all great, and I think they all kind of work together. We're all kind of like working towards disclosure and working towards benefiting humanity the best we can. So anything, you can pretty much find me anywhere in any of those groups that are related to uh, ET, UFO, UAP, you name it, I'm in there. So yeah,
Well, that's fantastic. And for anybody who's watching, if you've had an experience of your own and you would like to come on the show and talk to me about it, or if you wanted to just email me and I'll read it on the air and make it anonymous, whichever the case may be, you can do so at Josh Rutledge, that's RUTLEDGE, at mysterialexperiences.com. This has been Mysterial Experiences. Your host, as always, Josh Rutledge. We had special guest Nancy Thames. And I thank you all so much for listening, so much for watching, and for continuing to support the show. So until next time, have a good evening, a good weekend, and a good week. Bye.
Bye.